This is definitely one of my more favourite cars I've ever had. I won't say it's my favourite, but certainly one of the most distinctive. In Littleborough, there used to be a little garage called the Arches. How typical is that? But of course, it was situated underneath the railway arch, and it's no longer there. But there's a few guys there that, amongst doing mechanics, that also sell a car or two, maybe three. I think I bought 3 from them particular people. But this one, the Datsun 280c, was definitely one I have many happy memories with. For one thing, it's so distinctive and big, about the same size as a Granada, but because of its styling, it made it look even bigger. It was a really curious thing. The tailgate had 2 wipers on it. I'd never seen one of those before. I think there's a Toyota Camry with that. But anyway, and also we had a shopping window. 4 windows that wound down with a winder, and then right at the back, a shopping window that was dealt with a motor and a switch on the dashboard, which was one of the most curious things I've ever seen. With a 2.8 Nissan engine, or it would have been a Datsun of course, 2.8 Datsun engine, manual gearbox, sounded really very smooth indeed. And for what it was actually quite economical. I was surprised. What did I have at the same time? I had a Capri 2 litre S around about the same time, and I thought it was about as good on fuel as that. That might not be any massive achievement, I suppose. Anyway, this car was definitely a favourite amongst people I knew. It was nicknamed the Whale because it was grey and looked like a whale, which is kind of obvious. But if I mentioned to any of my brothers now, do you remember the Whale, which I wouldn't speak like that, but if I did do, they would instantly know what car I was talking about. The back seats folded down flat. It was definitely big enough for a man of my height to stretch out properly and have himself a lovely sleep in the back. One day I was buying some samosas down Milkston Road, and this chap come up to me and said, "I'm going to buy that car for you, I'm going to buy it off you now." And I said, "Well, it's not for sale, so you're going to struggle with that." But then he started pulling cash out of his pocket and saying, "I'll give you this for it." I think he said £500. "I'll give you this £500 for it now," which admittedly was an awful lot more than what I paid for it. Because when I come to buy this car, I just said, "Oh, it's just an old Datsun, isn't it? It's not really worth anything. It's not any good." And for some reason, the guy in the garage said, "Yeah, all right then," and he let me have it for 200 quid. Anyway, as it goes, I didn't sell it. I liked it too much. Most definitely. It was just a really cool car. Obviously, it's long gone. But would you like to know how it ended up going? Well, I'm going to tell you. On one occasion, I was down in Telford with it, where I had a particular girlfriend, and we was taking a particular trip from Telford down to Farnborough in Hampshire, where Senior Mustard lived at the time, although he wasn't called Senior Mustard at the time. I'd like to say we was having a lovely trip. We was doing it quite late in the evening, down the M6, and suddenly it didn't feel quite as good. Felt a bit kind of maybe at the time I didn't really look at the dials quite as often as I would do now, but I did happen to look down at the temperature gauge, and it was right up at the top, properly right up at the top. So I did what you'd expect and pulled over onto the hard shoulder. That revealed what you might expect. Pulled over, lots and lots of steam coming out of the front. A sad day. The really weird thing was though, I did the thing that you're not supposed to do, and opened up the bonnet. And there, underneath the bonnet, was its straight 6 engine, glowing red. It was that hot. I couldn't believe it. It was at that point where I did the sensible thing and called out the breakdown people, who simply relayed me back to Telford, which would have been possibly a good idea, except I didn't live in Telford. I lived in Rochdale. The next morning I went out and it started, but it didn't sound quite the same. It was kind of like that. And that's because I had ruined it. I had cooked the engine, but it still started, it still drove. And I did this rather silly thing of driving it back the 90 miles from Telford to Rochdale. But I had to keep stopping and filling it up with water. and I didn't really go much beyond 50 miles per hour all the way. That's such a shame. I would have hung on to that car for quite a while. I don't know how long, but how many of those are left? I bet there's not one left on the road. Quite sad about that one. Whilst owning that car, I never saw another one. And the one and only time I've ever seen a car the same as that was in Basingstoke in somebody's garden, all covered in leaves and stuff and basically rotting away. That's how rare that car was.